Hello, I hope you're doing well. Today we're discussing my favorite modern science fiction series. This series is one I read about a year ago now. It was brought back to my mind because my sibling picked it up and they're loving it. Hearing them describe the way that they're experiencing the books and the story brought back everything from when I read it, and oh my god, it is just so good. I could lose myself in this series for days. It's incredible. The series in question is the Southern Reach Trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer. It's currently a trilogy. Apparently there's a book 4 on the way and maybe a book 5, but those are just rumors right now. The series consists of annihilation, authority, and acceptance. I'm happy to make a video on each of the 3 books in the series, but for this I'm just going to talk about it as a whole. The basic premise of the Southern Reach Trilogy, and I'm not going to get too deep into this, I'm not going to give any spoilers, I'm going to keep this as focused on the quality of the overall thing as possible. The basic premise is that there is a place, there is an anomalous location where reality is just a little bit different. Nature has a different role, it's sort of taken over some parts of this place, and there's a barrier, and people, research teams, have periodically been going in to find out what's going on and why this is here. That is effectively all that you need to know when it comes to plot. It really is about this mystery, this anomalous place, this really bizarre warping of the norm, how it works, why it's there, the way that what happens there changes the characters and helps them develop as they go through the story. That may seem overly simple, that may seem like a very vague plot, but I promise you there is so much to it. And the best part, one of the best parts of the series, in my opinion, is getting into the mysteries about this place called Area X and just finding out what's going on. The Southern Reach Trilogy is sci-fi, but it's also cosmic horror. Cosmic horror is not the kind of thing where you're gonna read it and there's gonna be a jump scare and you'll be super taken aback. It's not the kind of insidious creepiness like you'd find in a lot of films these days that are horror films. Cosmic horror has a lot more to do with a feeling of existential dread than a feeling of direct terror. This series does it the best I've ever read. It is my favorite cosmic horror series, piece of fiction ever. There is a movie that goes along with the first book, Annihilation, and the movie is very good. It also does cosmic horror well, but it is quite different from the book. I think the book blows it out of the water. This series is just the best cosmic horror I've ever experienced. A good example of cosmic horror is H.P. Lovecraft. Horrible person, pretty good writer. The stories are really interesting that he did, and a lot of what he spoke about when it came to cosmic horror is like an indescribable, unfathomable, terrible creature or thing or force. The Southern Reach Trilogy has indescribable, unfathomable, outside of our normal perception things, but they're described way better than Lovecraft ever could. And it's not like a deeply problematic metaphor for H.P. Lovecraft's incredibly horrible racism. Vandermeer approaches cosmic horror with, instead of the attitude that he can't describe it, it's indescribable, it's unfathomable, he sort of oversaturates descriptions. He gives contrasting ideas of what things look like, how they sound, how they feel to experience. That feels very natural, and it also is on theme because so much of the series is about science and about human perception and differences in perception. So having these intensely varied and somewhat contrasting descriptions of things left me and the people I know who read this series with very different ideas of how things look sometimes. That is so much more fun and so much cooler than just saying, I don't know what it looks like, it's crazy, it's scary, you have no clue, it's too much for your brain to handle. Having too much for your brain to handle looks a lot more like Overload than it does just no description whatsoever. So the plot is an excellent setup. It's a beautiful, deep mystery to get into and understand over time. The cosmic horror elements are incredible. I think it, again, is the best execution of that subgenre I've ever seen. The characters are uniquely excellent in this series. One of them, and this is not a spoiler, this is the main character of the first book, is the biologist. She is so well written because she's incredibly divisive. Amongst the people I know who've read this, one person loved her so much and related to her and was like, she's so cool, I get it. One person enjoyed reading about her but really disliked her as a person. Another person thought she was super cool and admired the way that she approached the world. I personally felt connected to her in some ways and very different from her in others. The common thread among those people is that she was really fun to read about. Regardless of if they liked her or didn't like her, she was an engaging character and her growth and development was incredible to witness. The character development that the biologist goes through I think is uniquely good, uniquely extraordinary amongst everything I've ever read. You'll see as it goes forward what I mean. I don't want to spoil anything about that, but she's so well written. The way that she grows and develops is probably the most extraordinary of any character I've seen in fiction. It's kind of a unique situation. You'll see what I mean if you read the books. It's just so cool. There are other amazing characters. The psychologist is one. Her development is incredible and so fascinating. Not going to spoil any of that. I'm not going to say any other characters either because it would kind of be a spoiler. So much of this series, of the beauty of it, of the extraordinary writing, is in the deepening of the mystery and the development of the people and finding out who's involved, what's going on, why things happen the way they do. It's so fascinating, and it feels like a true, wonderful, natural mystery. It captures the feeling in science. I have a biology degree, and a big part of why I love science is this idea of an understandable but not yet understood natural phenomenon or natural world that you can explore and have ideas about and find out more about and just enjoy the beauty of. This series is that feeling in book form, which is incredible. My bias as an actual biologist towards loving the book series is apparent. There's a lot about nature. That is the big theme, I think, of the entire series. There are other themes as well about humanity, change, but the biggest one is about how we treat nature. And that was really compelling to me as someone who's studied it and engaged with it. I think it's an incredibly relevant and important theme to talk about. I really don't want to give away too much at all, but there's this really cool idea of we push on nature in so many ways. Greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, extinctions, all these terrible things. There's an idea of what if nature could push back. And it's not that simple. That's not necessarily what's happening or not happening in the book. But it's sort of an idea that is pervasive, I felt, throughout it, and I loved that the author asked that question. I think it was really interesting, and it gave me a lot to think about. Even just the setting and the physical descriptions of where you are in this series are incredible. Jeff Vandermeer actually lives in Florida, where I'm from. He lives in North Florida, and the setting is based on the park that is on the Gulf Coast of North Florida. I'm from Southeast Florida, so it's a different world sort of, but a lot of what the descriptions were in the book matched up to things that I'd seen in real life. And it felt like home in a weird way. Like, of course, a lot of the series happens in this very different version of home, but it still felt comforting, and it felt honestly more impactful because I knew what it felt like to walk on sand up to a certain structure that I'm not going to talk about. I knew what the surroundings would look like, how they'd smell, how it would sound to be there. It was extraordinary to read. And even if you don't have that background where you grew up in a similar setting, it's so tangible and it really just throws you into it and immerses you completely. The 3 books we do have, I think, are good enough. I'm very interested to see if we get a 4th and a 5th, what they're going to be about. I'd love to read them. I want to know more. But the 3 that we have, I do think they conclude the story in a way that is acceptable. I don't want to say how much you find out. I don't want to say how much you know at the end. Don't want to say what happens at all. But they conclude in a way that I found satisfying. That's important, especially when you have a big, deep mystery. I felt like I knew enough walking away where I could comfortably love the series, love how things are wrapped up, and also love the questions that remained. The actual books themselves follow different styles and archetypes, which is super cool. Book 1 is very much an exploration novel. Book 2, I actually compare to a spy novel. It's kind of political, kind of maneuvering, very interesting. Book 3 brings those things together along with other elements that I actually don't want to talk about because they'd be spoilers. This is one of those series where the more you know, the more you just can't say, simply because one of the big plot devices, one of the big narrative elements is this incredible mystery. So as you learn more about it, you really just can't go back and be like, oh, have you heard about this? Do you know about this? What do you think about that? You've got to just lock in. And reading the books, it reminds me of putting together a puzzle. It reminds me of delving into some sort of maze and finding your way through it. Or if you've done scientific research, like having a scientific question, natural question, and putting together the pieces to answer it. I just love how much science clearly played into this. I love how much naturalism played into it. I love the extraordinary writing. Just down to the sentence level writing, it's really, really good. I don't think necessarily it's as insane as some other books I've read. Recently I got back into reading the Dune series, and the prose is just crazy. It's this very highbrow, high-intensity science fiction writing. Annihilation and Authority and Acceptance all have elements of that, but they're definitely brought further into the modern era of writing. They're more accessible. That doesn't mean they sacrifice anything in terms of quality. They have a journalistic element where everything is described clearly, but also because of the cosmic horror nature, it becomes muddied, it becomes poetic at times. It feels like I'm reading adventure logs from some crazy expedition to somewhere totally unknown. It's just so immersive. I can't overstate how much I just got into these books. I think I tore through all 3 of them within the span of 2 weeks. That is crazy. Book 1 is kind of short. Book 2 and 3 also relatively short based on what I've been reading recently, but they're not small books by any means. Book 1 kind of is, but it's short and sweet and perfect. You can actually take book 1 as a standalone, but the series is so good, I wouldn't pass that up. Everything I've said so far would let you know that this is an extraordinary series worth reading. It's really good. What makes it my favorite modern science fiction series? It is almost unique amongst all other sci-fi stories that are out right now. There are very few comparisons, maybe Roadside Picnic, but that's still pretty different. This is just its own thing, and it does it so well. It has these natural elements, it has this cosmic horror element, it has this mystery. It's a very new, wonderful idea for a series, and it does something that sci-fi critically needs to do, in my opinion, which is to make commentary on the world that we live in, and the world we could live in, and the world we have lived in. It does that so well. The unique fusion of the naturalist elements, the very important themes, the cosmic horror elements, the mystery, the extraordinary writing, the excellent characterization. All these things combine to make it utterly unique, and I love that it's set somewhere that's so tangible that you can actually look up pictures of, that it's like a real place. It's not actually like set there. It's just like the setting is directly inspired by that place. You can actually go there. Like, I plan to go there in the next year or two and just feel totally creeped out. It's so cool. As a whole, it's just totally its own thing. And I have a lot more modern sci-fi to read. Like, I'm gonna read the Children of Time book. I'm gonna read more about the Expanse series. There's a lot that I'm gonna get into. But I think of the series that have come out in the last 20 years in sci-fi, like since I've been born, this series has stuck with me more than any other. And it has made me feel the most emotions. It's made me feel the most involved in the story, the most immersed. It's just really special. Parts of my ultimate favoritism for this series might be because of things specific to me, like being from Florida, studying biology, loving cosmic horror, loving mysteries, loving science fiction in general. But I do think that this series has so much merit and is so worth reading. I've recommended this series to I think half a dozen people now, and every one of them loved it except for one person who wasn't a huge reader going into it, and I think I just gave them the book before they were ready to read something that crazy. But everyone else agrees that it's one of the best series they've ever read, one of the best sci-fi series they've read for sure, and I cannot recommend it enough. Let me know if you want more detailed videos on Annihilation, Authority, and Acceptance separately. I'm happy to make full spoiler videos on those and kind of talk through what's going on, because this is something that I could sit and theorize about for weeks. It's so cool. In any event, have you read the Southern Reach Trilogy? Let me know your thoughts on it if you have, and if you want to read it, definitely go for it. Thank you so much for being here, and happy reading.